Hello my dear friends, welcome to my YouTube channel that is Learning and Programming with Chetan. Today in this particular video we will going to discuss about constructors and this keyword in Java programming language. So let us start with the first topic, that is constructor. So my first question is, what is constructor? So constructor is used to initialize an object of a class, or a constructor is used to initialize an instance of a class. Now my second question is, why it is known as constructor? So it is known as constructor because it is used to construct the instance of a class. That is, it is used to initialize the values of an instance variables of an object. Now my next question is, when it is called? When we create an instance of a class, at that point of time JVM calls the constructor. My next question is, when memory is allocated for an object. So when we create instance of a class, then a constructor get called, and at that point of time the memory is allocated for an object. Now my next question is it necessary to define constructor in class? Then its answer is no, it is not necessary to define constructor in a class. That is, when we don't define constructor, then at compile time a compiler provides the default constructor in a class. Now our next question is, do constructor return any value? Then its answer is yes, our constructor return a value, and that value is an instance of a class. Now my dear friend, let us move to our next topic, that is the rules for creation of constructor. So our first rule is related to constructor name. Constructor name should always be same as that of the class name. Our second rule is related to access modifier. While creating a constructor, we can use any access modifier, that is, it can be public, private, protected, or default. Now our next rule is related to return type. So our constructor must not have any return type. Now the question might arise in your mind that as constructor do not have any return type, then why it is returning a value? My dear friends, it's true that a constructor don't have any return type, but a constructor always return a value, and that value is the instance of our class. Now our next rule is related to modifiers. That is, a constructor cannot be abstract, static, final, and synchronized. My dear friends, we will discuss about all these four modifiers in a separate video in detail. Now our next topic is related to types of constructors. So there are two types of constructor in Java programming language: default constructor and parameterized constructor. So let us first discuss about default constructor. So my first point is, what is default constructor? So a constructor which do not have any parameters or which do not have any argument, then those constructors are known as default constructor. Now our second point is related to uses of default constructor. So a default constructor is used to assign the default values to the instance variable of an object. Now my dear friends, by the help of program, we will try to understand all the points which we have discussed till now. So I have created an employee.java class which is of type public, and inside our employee.java class I have created three fields, that is employee ID, employee name, and employee department, and all these three fields are private and their return types are int and string. And inside this class I have defined a method with the name print employee details, and inside this method we are printing the details of an employee. So currently I have commented this piece of code. We can comment a code in Java by two ways. First one is by using double slash. This is used for single line comment, and by this way we can comment multiple lines. So when we comment any code in our Java program, then at compile time that code will not be compiled by a compiler. Now before moving further, let us discuss about this keyword. So this keyword is used to refer to the current instance of a class. That is, by using this keyword we can directly refer to the current object. Now there are various applications of this keyword. Here we are using this.empid. It means that we are directly referring the empid instance variable of our current object. Now I have created an test employee.java class, and inside this class I have created a main method. and by using this main method we will try to understand various concepts related to our constructor. My dear friends, if you remember that we have discussed, is it necessary to define the constructor in a class, and that answer is no, it is not necessary to define the constructor of a class. So here by using this statement employee emp object 1 equals to new employee, we are creating an object of our employee class by using a new keyword, and here we have used a default constructor. But if we go inside our employee class, we have not defined any default constructor. As you can see that currently our default constructor is commented, and by using this statement we are printing the details of our employee object. Now let's try to run our program. So my dear friends, here you can see that our employee ID value is coming as 0, employee name is null, and employee department is null. You might be thinking that from where these values are coming. My dear friends, we are getting these values from our default constructor. When we are compiling this employee.java class at that point of time, the compiler is providing the definition of a default constructor, and inside the default constructor the default values is assigned to our instance variables. That is why we are getting the value of employee ID as 0 because the default value of integer is 0, and here we are getting employee name and employee department as null. This is because the default value of string is null. Now let us define our default constructor. I have already written the code for default constructor, and here I have uncommented that code and I am saving my program. Now let us try to understand various rules which we have discussed earlier. The first one was related to constructor name. So here you can see that the constructor name and our class name is same. Second point is related to access modifier. So here you can see that our access modifier is public. Now it can be private also, and it can be protected also. Our third point is related to return type. Now here you can see that our constructor is not having any return type, but if we will use return type with our constructor, then it will behave as a normal method. So our constructor must not have any return type. Now our next rule was related to modifiers, that is it cannot be abstract, static, final and synchronized. So let us try to make our constructor as static. So my dear friends, here you can see that our compiler is not allowing us to define our constructor as static because static keyword is not allowed with constructor. Similarly, abstract, final and synchronized keyword is not allowed. So this is about our default constructor, and inside my default constructor I am simply printing a statement. Now let us try to run our program. Now my dear friends, here we have defined our default constructor, and when we will run our program, then at runtime JVM will check for a default constructor inside employee.java, and if it will find the default constructor, then it will try to execute the code which is present inside the user defined default constructor. So here you can see that in output we got default constructor object is created. So we have discussed about default constructor. Now my dear friends, let us try to understand about parameterized constructor. So a constructor which have arguments and parameters, then that constructor is known as parameterized constructor. Let's see what is the use of parameterized constructor. So a parameterized constructor is used to assign the values to the instance variables of an object. Now let us try to understand about our parameterized constructor by the help of a program. My dear friends, here I am commenting our default constructor and I am uncommenting our parameterized constructor. Now inside my test.java class, let me comment this piece of code for default constructor and let me uncomment this piece of code. Now here you can see that we are creating an employee2 object by using new keyword, and this is our constructor, and inside our constructor we are passing parameters. So when we pass parameters to our constructor, then that constructor is known as parameterized constructor. If we go inside parameterized constructor, here we have assigned the values to our instance variables by using this keyword. So here this .empid will directly refer to the instance variable of our current object and it will assign the employee ID value. Now let us try to run our program. Here you can see that when we have created our employee object emp obj2 by using parameterized constructor, then at runtime it will call that parameterized constructor and it will assign the values to our instance variables. It is printing the statement which we have written inside our parameterized constructor. Here you can see that we have passed 1 to our parameterized constructor as a employee ID value. That is why we are getting this value in our output. And here we have passed Chetan as an employee name and we have not passed any department value. That is why its value is coming as null. Now my dear friends, let us see one important concept related to constructors. Let us uncomment this piece of code. So here you can see that it is giving compile time error and the error is constructor employee is undefined. That is, a default constructor is not defined inside our employee.java class as we have commented our default constructor. So here you need to understand one important point, that is, if we have defined any parameterized constructor inside our Java class and if we are trying to create an object by using default constructor, then it will give us compile time error. So to solve this error, we need default constructor along with our parameterized constructor. Now as our employee.java class contains default constructor as well as parameterized constructor, that is why we are not getting any error inside our test employee.java class. Now my dear friends, let us try to understand our last concept, that is constructor overloading. Before discussing constructor overloading, let us first discuss about what is overloading. So overloading is the ability to take more than one form. That is, a same function can be used to perform different operations based on different inputs or based on different situations. Now let us try to understand what is constructor overloading. So constructor overloading means a constructor can be used to perform different operations based on different inputs or different parameters provided to a constructor. Let us try to understand a constructor overloading with an example. So my dear friends, inside our employee.java class, I have defined one more constructor with the same name employee and it is accepting 3 parameters. Now inside our Java class we have default constructor with no arguments, we have one parameterized constructor with 2 arguments and we also have one more parameterized constructor with 3 arguments. And inside our test.java class, let me uncomment these 2 lines. Now here you can see that I am creating an object by using a constructor with no arguments. Here I have created an object by using a constructor with 2 arguments and here I have created an object by using a constructor with 3 arguments. So here you can see that at runtime JVM will call constructors based on arguments which we are passing to our constructor. This process is known as constructor overloading. Now before running our program, let us see the code of our constructor with 3 arguments. So here you can see one more application of this keyword, that is, this keyword is also used to refer to the constructor of an object. So in this statement you can see that we are passing 2 parameters and we are calling our parameterized constructor with 2 arguments. So if we are referring our constructor by using this statement, then one important rule is that it should always be the first statement inside our constructor. And here we are assigning the employee department to emp department instance variable of an object. Now let us try to run our program. So my dear friends, here you can see that by this statement it is calling a default constructor and it is printing this statement, and from this method it is printing default values of our instance variables. And we are creating our emp2 object by passing 2 parameters, then it is printing this statement and it is assigning the values of these 2 instance variables. That is why we are getting the values of employee ID and employee name, and here we have passed 3 parameters to our constructor. So it will go inside this constructor. Here on the first statement we are calling the constructor with 2 arguments. That is why it is first printing this statement and it will also assign the values of employee ID and employee name. Then the flow will come to this statement and it will assign the value of employee department, and then it is printing this statement. That is why we are getting this statement, and then when we are calling print employee detail methods, then we are getting a value as employee ID 2, employee name Anand, and employee department value as R&D department. So my dear friends, hope you are able to understand about constructor and this keyword. We have discussed about various rules, and we have also discussed about default constructor and parameterized constructor, and we have also tried to understand about the concept of constructor overloading. Do like, comment and subscribe my channel and click the bell icon for latest updates.